train your coaches. This video you'll see here, and there's a series of these videos on my website. It's all stick work drills. 4 years ago, I watched us practice indoors, and I saw a tremendous amount of standing around and teaching the big picture. And so I put a mandate out that when you're practicing indoors in an hour-and-a-half practice, you had to do 45 minutes of stick work. If we can't catch and throw, as Richard Meade used to always say, if you can't block and tackle, you can't play football. If you can't catch and throw, you can't play lacrosse. So our daily bread things are that we have to do catch stick work for 45 minutes for our indoor practices. That can be, stick work or ground balls, especially for the younger, for everybody. But our high school teams don't practice indoors, just our youth teams. So when I got done sending that newsletter out to our coaches, the feedback was, I don't know 45 minutes worth of stick work drills. So I thought it was great. I thought it was a great response by them to tell me that versus screw him. I'll do my line drills for 10 minutes and then we'll do whatever I want to do. So I did a 2-hour talk on every stick work drill I've ever done in 25 years of coaching college and 30 years coaching college and high school. And it really benefited them, not only because we did a lot more stick work that year, was that during the spring and during the fall, they had some other tricks in the bag besides doing the same thing over and over and over again. So that's been very helpful to us. What I'm learning recently, I've got a lot of contacts from rec coaches or rec program directors about helping and doing a coaches clinic for that rec program alone. Because of the club influence, the better coaches or their experienced lacrosse players who are now dads are not coaching rec, they're coaching club. And therefore, they're getting a lot of coaches that have no lacrosse experience. So what I talked about was this is not, or athletic experience. This is not a teaching X's and O's. This is if I do this with the rec team, this is about fundamentals, and this is about classroom management. As a dean of students, my uncle, who was a teacher, once asked me, what makes my job difficult? And I said, a teacher with poor classroom management. So I had teachers who were really smart and knew content, but couldn't manage a classroom. And that turned into a disaster for them and for me and for the kids. I had teachers who, I don't know if they knew knowledge, but they had great classroom management and they got stuff done. So we talked about it's not just X's and O's. How do you run a practice? How do you use your staff? How do you communicate? One of my pet peeves is, as a teacher and as a coach, when you're coaching, tell them what to do versus what not to do. And I think those are things you got to tell people who aren't used to coaching or haven't been trained in coaching or haven't been trained in as teachers. I think that's so important. On my website, there is it's long. I did it at the U.S. Lacrosse Convention years ago, is practice planning. And a lot of it goes into that kind of talk. I remember doing that and not excited about doing that talk. And I couldn't get out of the classroom. It was packed. It was supposed to be a 45-minute talk. I was there for an hour 10. I was surprised how few coaches were well adversed on how to run how to coordinate a practice, how to plan a practice, what to think about in a practice, how long to do things. And as guys who play, those aren't the things I think you pay attention to. Right? As a player, I'm not sure how much you pay attention to how long a drill was, or how the drill was run, or how the coach maintained things, or how he split people up, or how we had things going on 2 different ends, or we had 4 different drills going. So we've really talked to our guys. Now that you have all 4 coaches, one guy's warming the goalies up, and then somebody else doing stick work or ground balls, 2 stations. Do different things, mix it up. And that's been very beneficial to us. So add those, go back to that 4 coaching thing. 1 guy's responsible for goalies, 1 guy's responsible for Fogos, and the other guys coach as they need to. So we do Fogo stuff with the players, we expect one of those coaches to come. We do goalie stuff in this office of Brian Phipps, we expect one of those goalies to come. Train your coaches. We talk about this, leadership through presence. You got to be there. And one of the reasons why we have 4 coaches is that I know guys are missing practice. They travel, they have fires to put out the office. So if we have one guy miss, we got 3 coaches. We get 2 guys miss, we have 2 coaches there. We have a guy miss a weekend for whatever it is, we have 3 coaches to the sideline. I think you can't do the sideline well without 3 coaches. One guy has to run the box. And that is a training in its own. Running the box is difficult. Running the box is hard. And there's a system to run the box. And you may have your own system. We have a system that we use, and we train our coaches on the verbal communication of the players, the coaches run the box, and the situation that we want them doing, and how we want it done. And then there's a guy that coaches the offense, guy coaches the defense, and that's about the minimum you can do it. To have one guy run both ends of the field, boy, that's tough. That's tough. I had one of my head coaches that he was running the box, and he learned very quickly. I said, I'm not encouraged to do that. And he did it for a game. He called me, goes, I'm never doing that again. So you can't be the head coach and run the box. It's just too hard. Empower your coaches. I think this is probably something, whether it's because I'm getting older, smarter, more mature, or whatever it is, but boy, I didn't want to let my coaches do anything without my approval when I was first doing this. All the practice schedules were on our website. You couldn't change practice. You couldn't do anything without me okaying and authorizing that change. I don't do that anymore. Coaches change practice because their work schedules, you make that change. I think I've done a better job. I've learned this from both my tournaments and here is I've done a better job training my coaches in my office, whether it's one-on-one or a group or being around at practices and games. They know what I want and they know what I don't want. And therefore they know what I want, but they also feel comfortable that they know what I want and can make decisions without having to come to me. And that's been fantastic. Deal with parents. What policies do you have? One of the things that we talked about, the playing time discussion at the bottom, Tom Ripley, who coaches one of our teams, and he brought this up in one of our meetings. I had him present to our coaches one time how he handles his parents and sideline. And he came up with some policies that we changed. And one of them was, we used to say that if you want to talk to me about playing time, it's got to be the player and the coach. That's it. Well, for a 3rd or 4th, 5th, or 6th grader, that's hard. That's really hard. Even for some 7th graders, that's really difficult to do. And especially with a lot of our coaches having, pretty good size egos and pretty good size presence, that's really hard for a young kid to do. So we say now is we want a parent present, but we want the conversation to be between the player and the coach. Couple things happen. More players are coming to our coaches, which we want to happen. 2 is the message that the coach gives to the player is relayed appropriately to the parent. I mean, we're all parents. How many times have your son or daughter come home from something and said, I talked to a teacher or a coach, and what did they say? I don't know. Or you get a bad answer, you don't get the right answer. So we want the parent there so that the parent's hearing actually what we say. That's been a big thing. One of the other directions that I give our coaches is helping it. I learned this as the Dean of Students at St. Mary's is that, if there's a conflict or an issue or it's brewing, even between a teacher and a student or a player and a coach in the club business, I want to know about that before the parent calls me. Because this is what used to happen when I was at St. Mary's. An issue would occur in a classroom, nobody would tell me. The kid would go home, tell his parents that the teacher did this and this. The parent's pissed, the parent calls me. And all I can do in that situation is listen to the parent and say things like, I hear you, I got it, correct. And what the parent's hearing, and I'm trying to do is get the parent information or side of the story before I go to my teacher and get my teacher's side of the story. The issue is when I'm not telling the parent, you're wrong, I'm telling them, I got it, I hear you, understood. What they're hearing me say is, I support you, you're right. The teacher is wrong. So now I go and talk to the teacher the next day or the next free period, whatever it is, and I get a totally different story. It's been 24 hours, 8, whatever the hours time is. The parent just called their spouse and said, Mr. Hogan agrees with me. The teacher was wrong. He told me, he didn't say anything negative. He agrees with me. Now I got to call that parent back and say, nah, you're wrong. And they're freaking pissed. So the same thing here is we tell our coaches, if something's brewing, tell me. So if the parent calls me, I'm prepared. So at St. Mary's put that policy in. A parent call and say, Matt was a jackass. The teacher so-and-so was not nice to my child today. I can say, whoa, let me tell you what happened. And the parent's completely disarmed and backs off 90% of the time. Because it shows that we as a school, we as an organization, the club, we are communicating to each other. And this guy who's the director, who everyone thinks is doing this just to make money, is actually involved and engaged. It changes the parent's perspective when they know that everyone's talking to each other and then I can react to it. The funniest thing was one time I had a parent who was a bad parent and the coach was in my office and I told the coach, I'm going to call this parent. You've talked to him. I've talked to him. I'm going to call this parent. And one of the things the coach said to me after the conversation was over, one of the saddest things about that conversation was that you knew how to respond to every excuse he made. You know, as a coach, as a director, we've heard all the reasons why my son or my child or I can do things I want to. So it's just the way the nature of the game is. But when you respond right away to a situation, I think they feel more comfortable and they back off a little bit.